The chamber is open and full of whispers.
Before we dive in, check the link in the description if you want exclusive timelines, members-only videos you won't find on YouTube, all on our Patreon. A man who had already outlived 2 lifetimes made a decision. He sat alone in a room that did not yet have a name, a circular tower chamber smelling of cut stone and candle tallow, and the particular cold of a Scottish autumn that has been let inside and never quite left. On the table before him, one battered traveling hat, a sword he had carried for 40 years, and a quill. He did not write anything with the quill. He simply looked at the hat for a long time. Then he pressed 2 fingers to his own temple, drew something out slowly, the way you pull a long thorn from a deep place, and set it inside the hat like a folded letter inside an envelope. In case, he thought, in case it comes again. He had seen what it looked like when darkness organized itself. He had watched it take a generation. He understood, with the particular clarity of someone who has rebuilt the same wall twice, that his students would one day face a version of it he would not be alive to answer. So he left an answer. He tucked another fragment, older, rougher, into the blade. Not a memory. A reflex. The thing your hands know when your mind has gone blank with fear. Then he put on the hat one last time. It fit badly, as it always had. He took it off. He set it on the table. He did not come back to that room. 998 years later, give or take the imprecision of calendars, a boy with broken glasses and a lightning bolt scar stepped through the barrier at platform 9 3/4 and thought, very privately, something is about to happen. Harry Potter did not know why he thought this. He had been thinking it, in various forms, since the letter arrived, since the giant, since the vault beneath London that had his name on it. He had written it off as nerves, a skill you developed when you grew up in a house where having feelings about things got you locked in a cupboard. But this was not nerves. This was the feeling of walking toward something that had already decided you were coming. He filed onto the Hogwarts Express with the rest of them. He ate sweets he'd never tasted. He let a red-haired boy explain Quidditch to him with the earnest authority of someone who had grown up assuming the whole world cared about Quidditch. He changed into robes that were slightly too long. He watched the dark arrive outside the windows and felt, in the marrow of something older than his 11-year-old bones, that he was being carried the way a river carries a stone it has been carrying for a very long time. The boats crossed the lake. Hogwarts rose from the water. Every first year around Harry made some version of the same sound, a caught breath, a whispered "oh," a silence that was itself a kind of noise. And Harry understood it. The castle deserved that sound. It was enormous and old in a way that went past architecture, past stone, past the usual meanings of the word old. It was old the way certain silences are old, the way certain losses are. He did not make the sound. He looked at the castle and felt, somewhere beneath his sternum, the distinct and inexplicable sensation of coming home to a house you burned down yourself a long time ago, for reasons that seemed necessary at the time. He said nothing about this to anyone. The great hall was candlelight, and 4 long tables and 400 faces turned toward the door. Harry walked in with the others and kept his eyes forward and tried to feel like an 11-year-old boy attending his first day of school. He mostly managed it. The hat was on a stool at the front of the hall. Old, patched, battered in the specific way that things are battered when they have been cared for rather than used and discarded. A pointed wizard's hat. Nothing remarkable about it, except that Harry's eyes went directly to it before anything else in the room, before the floating candles, before the enchanted ceiling deep with clouds and cold stars, before the faces, before anything. His chest did something complicated. He looked away. Professor McGonagall read names from a list. Children walked forward and sat on the stool, and the hat was placed on their heads and called out house names. Harry watched it happen with the careful attention of someone cataloging information they already know and are checking for changes. The students around him shifted with nerves. He did not shift. He waited. Potter, Harry, the hall changed. Not the room. The room stayed exactly as it was. Same candles, same ceiling, same 4 tables, same stone walls carrying the same cold. But the quality of attention in it shifted like weather, like the moment before lightning when the air rearranges itself around the fact of what's coming. 400 people stopped breathing in slightly different rhythms and started breathing in one. Harry walked to the stool. He sat down. McGonagall raised the sorting hat toward his head. He watched it come down. The brim dropped over his eyes. The hall went dark. Silence, then something that was not a voice, too old for voice, too familiar for stranger, said, from inside his own skull, in a tone that carried the weight of something that has been patient for a very long time. There you are. Harry's hands went still on his knees. I wasn't sure, the not voice continued, whether you'd make it this far, whether the vessel would hold. You chose a difficult door, old friend. A very small door. Harry thought, with the portion of his mind still operating on 11-year-old logic, I didn't choose anything. No, said the hat. You never think you did. That was always your particular arrogance. You thought your decisions were impulses. You thought your instincts were accidents. A pause, carrying something that might have been amusement in a mind that had had nearly a millennium to develop a sense of irony. Do you know where you are? He knew. He had always known. He had not, until this moment, known that he knew. It came in all at once, not like a wave, not like any of the aquatic metaphors people used for being overwhelmed. It came like the way you remember the name of something you've been trying to remember for days. A sudden, quiet yes that is not surprising so much as it is correct. And he sat on the stool in the dark under the brim of the hat, and he remembered. Not everything. Not yet, but enough. Welcome home, Godric. The hat said it first to the inside of his head, in the not voice. Then it said it again, out loud. In the great hall of Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, on the 1st of September 1991, the Sorting Hat broke 998 years of ceremonial silence. Every first-year student froze. Every student at the 4 long tables stopped mid-motion, fork halfway to plate, whisper halfway to ear, quill halfway to parchment. The floating candles did not care and kept floating. The enchanted ceiling kept moving through its dark clouds. Everything else in the room stopped. The hat did not call out a house. It did something no account in any record, in any archive, in any of the many books that Hermione Granger had read in the preceding 3 months to prepare herself for this moment, had ever documented. It bowed. The brim folded forward over Harry's eyes. The whole hat dipped, slowly, deliberately, with the unmistakable quality of something choosing its own action rather than being moved, and then straightened, and sat on his head in ordinary silence, and said nothing else. At the staff table, Professor McGonagall had gone the particular shade of pale that on her face meant she was doing the internal arithmetic of an experienced person encountering something with no column in their ledger. Professor Flitwick had dropped his sheaf of notes. Professor Quirrell was very still in a way that was different from the stillness of shock. Tighter. Colder. A stillness with something moving behind it. And Albus Dumbledore, who had run this school for 40 years, who had faced a dark wizard without equal, who had planned for more contingencies than most people knew existed, sat with his hands folded on the table in front of him, his expression absolutely unreadable, and did not look at the hat. He looked at the boy. Harry sat on the stool with 998 years settling into him like sediment into river bottom, quietly, slowly, in layers, and he did not look at Dumbledore. He looked at the castle, specifically at the walls, the way you look at something you built. The hat was lifted from his head. McGonagall's hand was steady, her face was not. She held the sorting hat at arm's length for a half-second longer than necessary, then set it carefully back on the stool and turned to the remaining first years with the expression of a woman who has decided, professionally, that the next thing on the list is the next thing on the list. Roper, Melissa, a girl shuffled forward. The hall exhaled, in pieces, table by table, the way a crowd reassembles itself after witnessing something it hasn't yet agreed on a name for. Harry was not walking to the Gryffindor table. He was standing at the front of the hall, still looking at the staff table. He began walking toward it. The hall's renewed noise dropped back to silence, faster this time. The specific held breath that happens when everyone simultaneously understands the thing they're watching is not going to stop on its own. Harry reached the platform steps. 3 stone risers. He climbed them without hesitation and approached the far end of the staff table where, in the records settling into him in layers, a seat had always been his. There was no chair. Where the end chair should have been, the rightmost seat, where Godric Gryffindor had eaten breakfast every morning for 30 years, there was a gap. Flagstone and air. He stood in front of the gap for 3 seconds. Then, from the stone floor of the elevated platform, with a sound like a question being answered in a language that predated the question, a low, resonant shift of weight and wood. A chair appeared. Not conjured, not transfigured. It rose through the floor the way water rises through stone, unhurried, inevitable, the castle producing it the way the sea produces tide. High-backed, dark wood. Worn in the specific way things are worn by use rather than age. The armrests smooth where hands had rested for decades of mornings. The seat bearing the shallow concavity of someone who had sat in it long enough to leave a permanent impression. It had been under the floor for 998 years. It had been waiting. Harry sat down. The feast appeared. Harry ate from the staff table, which no student in 998 years of Hogwarts history had done, and around him the faculty managed this fact with varying degrees of grace. Flitwick passed him the potatoes. McGonagall passed him nothing but watched him at intervals of approximately 4 seconds. Snape ate, with precise, deliberate attention to his own plate. Quirrell ate nothing. Harry ate and watched the hall. At the Gryffindor table, slightly apart from the cluster of new Gryffindors, a girl with brown hair and the posture of someone maintaining composure through organizational effort pressed 2 fingers to her left temple and winced. Harry noticed this the way you notice a distant sound that matches something inside you, a register too specific to be coincidence, too faint to be certain. He filed it, set it next to the other things he was accumulating. Returned to his plate. Across the table at the center of the long high chair, Dumbledore lifted a lemon drop from a dish, turned it once between his fingers, and did not eat it. He was looking at the chair, at the worn armrests, the shallow seat, the way it fit the platform as though the platform had been cut to receive it. Harry did not look at him. He looked at the walls. The castle said nothing. It didn't need to. It had already said everything it had to say. The headaches started on a Wednesday. Hermione Granger had catalogued every headache she had ever experienced in her 11 years. Migraines from reading in poor light, tension headaches from examinations. One spectacular incident involving a car journey and a paperback held at the wrong angle for 4 hours. And none of them had felt like this. This one had a direction. Not pain radiating outward from a central point the way headaches were supposed to work, but pain with an orientation, a pull, the way a compass needle doesn't hurt, but insists. She noticed it first in Charms, Professor Flitwick mid-sentence about wand motion, and she pressed 2 fingers to her left temple, and the pressure came back at her from inside. From somewhere behind her eyes that was trying to show her something she didn't have the vocabulary for yet. She wrote it in her notebook under anomalous physical phenomena and went back to her notes. By Friday it had a frequency. Morning, stronger, afternoon, manageable, evening, when the castle had gone quiet around its own internal sounds, the shift of staircases, the mutter of portraits. The deep structural settling of stone that had been settling for 1,000 years, the headache became something she could almost follow, like a sound heard through walls. On Saturday she followed it. The library was where it started, which surprised her only briefly. She moved through the shelves with the familiar comfort of organized knowledge on either side, running her fingers along spines in the absent way she had developed at age 7 in the children's section of the Oxford Central Library, and the pull in her head moved with her. Past ancient runes, past magical theory, past the restricted section's iron gate, which she did not have permission to open, and which she noted and passed anyway, following the direction. She went left at the back wall. There was no left at the back wall. The back wall was shelving floor to ceiling, a rolling ladder on brass runners, Madame Pince's organizational system precise and complete and exhaustive. Hermione put her hand on the wall. The stone was warm, not the warmth of proximity to heating charms, but specific, a patch, roughly the dimensions of a door, radiating something that was not quite heat and not quite light, and not quite either of those things, but that her body recognized before her mind did, stepping forward before she had decided to step. The wall opened. Not dramatically. It simply became a door the way something reveals itself as a door. You push it, and it moves, and the concept reorganizes itself around the new information. Stone hinges. A darkness beyond that smelled of old paper and something older than paper, something mineral and deep. She went in. The room was long and low, and the shelving here was different, rougher. The wood dark with age, the kind of dark that is the color of something that has not been disturbed long enough to forget disturbance. No rolling ladders. The shelves ran to the ceiling, and the ceiling was close, and the books on them were not organized by Madame Pince's system, because Madame Pince, Hermione understood immediately, had never been here. Nobody had been here. Not for a very long time. She pulled a book from the nearest shelf. The cover was leather, dense and dark, no title on the spine or front board. And when she opened it, the script inside was not English and not Latin, and not any of the languages she had attempted at school. But she could read it. She stood in the narrow dark of the forgotten stacks and read a language she had not learned, and understood it, and did not find this surprising, which was the most surprising part. The memories arrived differently than Harry's had. His had come all at once in the dark under the hat's brim, sudden and total like a light switched on. Hers came in sequence, the way you read, page by page, in order, each thing building on the last. Rowena Ravenclaw had been, above all else, a woman who believed that knowledge accumulated rather than arrived, and her memories honored that belief even now. First, the castle under construction. Stone by spell by intention, the 4 of them working in the particular productive friction of people who agree on the destination and disagree on the route. Godric wanting everything higher, grander, more, Salazar wanting the foundations deeper, the wards more exclusive, Helga wanting rooms for everyone, warmth in the walls, and Rowena measuring, calculating, setting her quill to parchment in the cold of a Scottish morning, and working out the load-bearing requirements of moving staircases and the organizational logic of a library that would need to serve 1,000 years of students she would never meet. She had loved this library most of all of it. Hermione stood in the section of it that Rowena had sealed before she died. Private. Mine. Not because the knowledge is dangerous, but because some things you build for yourself and for the one who comes after. And the warmth in the walls was recognition, was welcome, was a door that had been waiting for someone with the right key. 1,000 years is not long, if you are a castle. She was still holding the book when she heard footsteps. Harry Potter was standing at the entrance to the hidden stacks with his shoulder against the stone doorframe, and the expression of someone who has just found what they were looking for in the last place they looked. They looked at each other. 11-year-old boy. 11-year-old girl, both carrying the accumulated weight of lifetimes they were still sorting through, and the ordinary social protocols of hello, we sat near each other at the feast did not seem to fit the available space. You found it faster than I expected, Harry said. I followed the headache, Hermione said. I followed you. You were about half a minute ahead of me. The castle told me where you'd gone. The castle told you. It's easier than it sounds. Hermione looked at the book in her hands, then back at him. How much do you have? Of the memories. Most of it. Coming in layers. He pushed off the doorframe and came into the room, trailing his hand along the shelving. I know what this room is. I know which books she put in here and approximately why, and I know she intended someone to find it. He stopped. You know it was supposed to be me, Hermione said, not a question. Yes, she absorbed this. Organized it, set it in its correct position relative to the other things she had been organizing since Wednesday. All right, she said. Harry looked at her. That's it? I'm not going to perform distress about it if that's what you mean. I have Rowena Ravenclaw's memories coming in at approximately 1 decade per hour, and a library full of texts nobody's read in 1,000 years, and about 4 months before examinations. She turned back to the shelf. I'd rather get started. They worked until the light through the library's outer windows had gone the color of old pewter. Hermione had pulled 7 books and made 31 pages of notes in a handwriting that was hers but tending, at speed, toward a different letter form entirely. Elegant, compressed, the hand of someone who had spent years writing quickly in cold places. She noticed this and made a note about it on page 32, and kept writing. Harry sat cross-legged on the floor with his back against the shelving and watched the room the way he had watched the hall at the feast. There's a ghost, he said, in Ravenclaw Tower. Hermione's quill paused. Helena, she said. The name came out before her mind had finished producing it. Yes, she held her quill over the parchment for a moment. Then, not yet. No, Harry agreed. Not yet. The pull in her left temple was quiet for the first time in 4 days. Not gone, she was beginning to understand it was not the sort of thing that went away, that it was the feeling of memory pressing against the present the way water presses against a dam, ongoing and structural, but settled, the way something settles when it has found the right container. She turned a page, outside in the main library, entirely unaware that the back wall of her domain had a door in it that had just been used for the first time in 998 years. Madame Pince extinguished the reading lamps in their proper order, section by section, from east to west, as she had done every evening for 23 years, and went home. The library held its secrets. It had been doing this for a very long time. It was quite good at it. The 3rd-floor corridor on the right-hand side was forbidden to all students who did not wish to die a most painful death. Dumbledore had announced this at the opening feast with the mild tone of a man mentioning a scheduling change. Harry had been sitting at the staff table when he said it, and had noted the word forbidden, and had noted also the way Dumbledore's eyes moved, briefly and without apparent intention, toward the right-hand corridor's general direction, the unconscious geography of a man confirming that a thing was still where he had put it. Harry noted the direction. He waited 3 months, because 3 months was the correct amount of time, long enough that the waiting was not obvious. Long enough to let Quirrell's deteriorating relationship with his own classroom door reach the point where the thing inside him was distracted by the problem of it. A cornered animal watches the cage. It stops watching the field. He told Hermione on a Thursday evening in the hidden stacks, over her 43rd notebook and a cup of tea that had gone cold 2 hours ago because she kept forgetting to drink it. Tomorrow, he said. She looked up from a Founder-era text on architectural ward theory and surfaced from it with the specific expression of someone returning from a significant distance. The 3rd floor, she said, not a question, before it decides to try again. She closed the notebook, opened a new one. Wrote Saturday at the top of the first page, and then wrote nothing else. What do you know about what's up there? She asked. Enough, Harry said, and the castle knows the rest. They went at 4 a.m, which was Hermione's suggestion on the grounds that 4 a.m. was the precise point at which the castle's various monitoring systems reached their lowest level of overlap. She had mapped the gaps in the coverage over the preceding 6 weeks with the thoroughness of someone who had decided that if she was going to break rules, she was going to break them with accurate information. The 3rd floor corridor announced itself by a change in the quality of the air, a living warmth underneath the stone cold, animal and faintly damp. Hermione identified it before Harry said anything, wrote biological entity, significant mass in the notebook without breaking stride, and followed Harry to the locked door at the corridor's end. Harry put his hand flat on the door. The lock remained physically closed, iron tongue and iron socket, but the door opened anyway, swinging inward with the unhurried cooperation of something that has decided, on the basis of who is asking, that the rules it was installed to enforce do not apply to this particular request. Beyond the door, Fluffy. 3 heads. Enormous, 3 pairs of eyes, each the size of a dinner plate, oriented on them from a head height of approximately 12 feet. All 3 mouths were closed. All 3 heads were asleep. On the floor beside the creature's rightmost paw, a small harp played to itself with the enchanted diligence of an object that had been wound up and left running. Hermione looked at the harp, made a note, looked at the trapdoor beneath Fluffy's central paw, made another note. Harry addressed the castle, not loudly, never loudly. The castle was not hard of hearing. It required the correct register, and the trapdoor unlatched. Fluffy's central paw shifted in sleep, a vast unconscious accommodation, and the door swung down. "After you," Hermione said. "You've been waiting to say that," Harry said. Since Tuesday, she confirmed, and they dropped through. The devil's snare reached for them immediately. It wrapped around Harry's left ankle and Hermione's right wrist simultaneously, and Hermione said, in the tone of someone reading from an internalized textbook, "It responds to light and heat," and produced her wand and cast without further commentary. A clean white light expanding from the wand tip, and the plant retracted from both of them at once. The key room was high-ceilinged and brightly lit. Hundreds of winged keys moving through the space in the specific organized chaos of a flock that had been enchanted to behave like one. Along the wall, a rack of broomsticks stood waiting. Harry took the nearest one without breaking stride, mounted, and kicked off from the stone floor. Godric's instincts read the movement of the flock the way they had always read the movement of things that were moving specifically to prevent being caught. Not watching the keys, but the spaces between them, the gaps in the pattern that the correct key would complete. He reached up and took it out of the air as it completed the first half of its circuit. The motion so economical it looked like the key had chosen to land in his hand, which, in a way, it had. He landed, handed Hermione the key. "The pattern's regular," he said. "Once you see it." I was looking at the same pattern, she said. You were looking at the keys. I was looking at the spaces between them. Hermione wrote something in the notebook while walking. The chess set was large, and the pieces were articulate, and they recognized Harry and Hermione the moment they entered with the particular attention of game pieces that have been designed to assess the player, and have immediately assessed these two as outside their intended parameters. Harry looked at the board with complete attention and the specific patience of someone reading a language they already know. He moved 4 pieces, the instruction happening at the level below language, and the board opened a path through its center. Hermione stood at the edge of the room. You moved the king's bishop incorrectly. By 1 square. The correct move takes 4 more exchanges to open the path, Harry said. The bishop doesn't mind. The bishop, at the end of its incorrect square, stood with the equanimity of a game piece that has been moved according to its nature. They walked through the open path and into the final chamber. The mirror of Erised stood against the far wall like a door that had decided to stop pretending it led anywhere. Tall, floor to ceiling, the frame elaborately carved with the continuous mirror reversal palindrome, I show not your face, but your heart's desire. Harry stood before it. His reflection looked back, and around his reflection the mirror showed him nothing dramatic. A version of the hall with the staff table correctly occupied, with the school in something like order, with the work completed. Not power. Not conquest, just the specific image of a thing finished and a thing at rest. He reached into the mirror. His hand went through the glass without resistance, the mirror making its determination that he wanted to find the object, not use it. And his fingers closed on something smooth and warm, in a way that stone should not be warm. The philosopher's stone was smaller than he had expected, the size of a large walnut. Red, catching the light with the dense gleam of something refined past the point where refinement usually stopped. He wrapped it in his handkerchief and put it in his pocket. At 7 a.m, in the corridor outside the hospital wing, Harry handed the stone to Professor McGonagall. Not Dumbledore. McGonagall, he chose this specifically, and she knew he had chosen it specifically, and she stood in the corridor holding the handkerchief-wrapped stone in both hands, and looked at him with the expression she had been developing over the preceding 3 months. The one that was not quite surprise anymore, because surprise required the situation to be unexpected, and the situation had stopped being unexpected around the 4th week of term. It should be somewhere safer, Harry said, and someone should know it's been moved. McGonagall looked at the stone. Looked at Harry. I'll inform the headmaster, she said. That would be appropriate, Harry agreed, and went to breakfast. Somewhere in the school, in a classroom with a door that stuck, the thing wearing Quirrell turned its borrowed face toward the 3rd floor and understood, for the first time, what it was actually dealing with. It did not find this understanding comforting. The thing about Severus Snape, Harry had decided over the preceding months, was that his hostility was architectural, not reactive, not rising and falling with provocation the way most people's hostility did. It was structural, load-bearing, built into the arrangement of the man the way the dungeon walls were built into the castle. Harry Potter was a category. The category received a predetermined response. This was, in its way, more interesting than if it had been personal. What he saw, watching Snape teach with the attention Godric's memories had taught him to bring to people who had not yet decided they were your opponent, was this: Snape was genuinely brilliant. The potion's mastery was real, visible in the lateral connections he made between ingredients and effects that the textbook didn't make. The way he answered the questions behind the questions students were actually asking. He was also, underneath the brilliance and the architectural hostility, someone who had been performing a particular role for so long that the performance and the person had become difficult to distinguish, even for Snape himself. The incident came on a Tuesday. Potions, third period. The dungeon was occupied with 22 students trying to brew a simple calming draught, and Snape moved through the benches in his customary circuit. He stopped at Lavender Brown's cauldron and made a comment about her knife work, accurate in technical content and calibrated to produce maximum discomfort. He stopped at a Slytherin's cauldron and said something low and approving that the rest of the class couldn't hear. He arrived at Harry's bench and stopped. The cauldron was producing exactly the right color at exactly the right consistency. "Potter," Snape said. "Professor, what is the contraindication for this draught in a patient who has recently taken a strengthening solution?" Harry told him, "Not from the textbook, from the underlying principle. The specific metabolic conflict, the residual trace elements, the precise symptoms of the interaction, the 2-hour window after which both compounds became inert." Snape looked at him. "Where did you read that?" Snape said. "Not did you read it, but the neutral geographical question of a man genuinely trying to locate the source." "I didn't," Harry said. "The principle follows from the compounds. If you understand what each element does independently, the interaction is predictable." The class was very quiet. "Adequate," Snape said, and moved on. The second beat came at the end of class. Snape said, "To the room in general, Mr. Potter, I am not accustomed to students who confuse our first name with an appropriate form of address." He was referring to the first lesson, 6 weeks ago. Severus, which Harry had not explained and which Snape had been carrying, with the suppressed quality of something held at careful distance, ever since. Harry closed his bag, looked up. "You're right, it was an old habit. I apologize for not correcting it sooner. This was the wrong answer for the situation Snape had been managing. It required either defensiveness or explanation. A genuine apology with no embellishment was a different thing entirely, and Snape received it with the expression of a man who has extended a hand for a handshake and found the other person handing him something he doesn't recognize. "See that it doesn't recur," Snape said. "Of course," Harry said, and picked up his bag, and did not move toward the door. Snape looked at him. "The Prince family," Harry said, in the tone of someone raising a subject of mild historical interest, "had a significant estate in the Midlands in the 11th century. I came across a reference to it in some older texts. I didn't realize there were still descendants." The room's silence became something with a different texture entirely. "What texts?" Snape said. Each word separated from the next with the careful spacing of someone buying time to think. "Founder-era materials. Library holdings." The notation was minor. A land record, mostly. Property boundary descriptions. He paused. "I wasn't looking for it. It came up in the context of something else." This was true. It was also not close to a complete account. Snape held Harry's gaze. The specific quality of a man who has spent his life being the most informed person in every room he occupied, encountering someone who might be holding a card he hadn't known was in the deck. "You should be careful," Snape said, "with historical documents of uncertain provenance." "I'm always careful," Harry said, "with everything." He went to the door. Later that evening, Harry sat in the corridor outside the Gryffindor common room with his back to the stone, and the castle held its steady temperature around him, and he felt the specific unpleasantness of a thing correctly done that was not, in any simple sense, a good thing. He had cost Snape something he had not enjoyed costing him. He got up, gave the password, and went in. Hermione was in the chair by the fire with her notebook and a cold cup of tea. "Well," she said. "He'll think about it," Harry said. "And then?" "I don't know yet." Hermione wrote something in the notebook. Turned a page. The Grey Lady was in the corridor outside Ravenclaw Tower this evening. She looked at me for a long time. "What did you do?" "I looked back," Hermione said. "And then I came here." Harry sat down in the chair across from her. The fire between them did what fires do. Hermione was petrified on a Thursday. Harry found out the way you find out things in a school, from the corridors themselves, the specific quality of movement that a building full of people develops when something has gone wrong. Foot traffic rerouting around a point of disruption the way water reroutes around an obstruction. He was at the hospital wing before the news had finished its first circuit of the school. Madame Pomfrey was at the door with the expression she kept for situations that required her to be professionally immovable. "She's stable, petrified, not harmed. The condition is reversible." "I know it is," Harry said. Hermione lay in the third bed from the left. Her eyes were open and sightless, fixed on the ceiling with the particular blankness of petrification, not the blankness of sleep but of a person fully intact and completely absent at the same time. She had a page torn from a book clenched in her hand. One she had ripped from a text in the hidden stacks and tucked into her sleeve, he understood, because she had worked out what the monster was and had been moving toward the library exit when it caught her through the medium of a ghost's reflected gaze. He looked at the torn page for a moment. 2 minutes is up," Pomfrey said. Not unkindly. Harry left. He did not panic. This was not composure, not suppression, not the performance of calm over an interior that was not calm. It was something older than panic and quieter than calm, the specific register of a person who has learned the hard way that panic is a form of self-indulgence in the moments when clarity is what the situation requires. Rowena's air was stone in a hospital bed, which meant the chamber was open, which meant the basilisk was active, which meant the diary had found its host. Harry stood in the corridor and assembled the available information. He needed the chamber. He needed to go alone, because taking anyone else into a space with a basilisk's direct line of sight was a calculation with only one acceptable outcome. He also understood, from the memories settling in him in their ongoing layers, that he would be able to speak to the creature. The scar on his forehead, the remnant of what Voldemort had accidentally left there on the night of October 31st, 1981, had granted him the parcel tongue ability from infancy, though he had not known it until now. The Godric memories did not suppress that inheritance. They sat alongside it, the way several things could be true of the same person at once. He went to find the Grey Lady first. Helena Ravenclaw haunted the upper corridors with the specific quality of presence that ghosts in genuine grief developed, not performance, but the quietness of someone who has been sitting with the same thought for 800 years and has not finished sitting with it. She turned when Harry came around the corner and looked at him with her gray 8 centuries steady gaze. "Helena," he said, "not the Grey Lady. Her name, in the register that came from a deeper place than 11 years of living." She went absolutely still. "You're not him," she said. Her voice had the quality of something heard through water. "No, not exactly. But I carry what he carried." She drifted closer, her expression doing something complicated, grief and recognition, and the particular expression of someone who has been alone with a memory for a very long time and has just been handed a version of the person the memory belonged to. "He used to find me when I was sad," she said. "He was the only one who didn't try to fix it. He understood that some things don't fix," Harry said. "They just change shape." Helena was quiet. The corridor held them both. "Your mother loved you," Harry said. "The memories she left don't have a version of her that didn't." This was not something he had planned to say. It arrived from the place where the memories had settled in him, from the specific weight of Godric's 40 years of watching Rowena with the attention of someone who knew her well enough to see past the surface to what she kept there. Something in Helena's expression changed, the way very old grief changed when it received something it had needed for a long time and had stopped expecting. "There's a basilisk in the school," Harry said. "I'm going into the chamber." "I know," she said. "I've heard it in the pipes for months. Is there anything you want me to tell it?" Helena looked at him for a long moment. "Tell it that the school is not what it was used for. Tell it that the man who built this place built it for children, and that what was done to it was not his intention." "I think it's been waiting for someone to say it," Harry said. He left her in the corridor. The entrance was a sink in Moaning Myrtle's bathroom, which was such a specific kind of indignity that Harry spent one moment appreciating Salazar's sense of humor before crouching in front of it and speaking to the small carved snake on the tap in the language the scar had always given him. Open, the pipe received him. The chamber was vast in the way that underground spaces were vast. Stone serpents ran floor to ceiling along the walls. Water moved somewhere beneath the floor. The torches, old ones, Salazar's design, burning without fuel on a charm that had been running for 1,000 years, gave the light of something that had given up being bright and settled for being present. At the far end, the basilisk lay coiled around the base of Salazar Slytherin's enormous stone face. 60 feet of it. Perhaps more. The head alone was larger than the door Harry had come through. Its eyes were closed. Harry stood at the chamber entrance and spoke in parcel tongue, and his voice in that language carried differently than it did in English. Less boyish. Something that went further back. "I am not your enemy, and I am not Tom Riddle." The basilisk's head lifted. Slowly, its eyes remained closed. "I know what you are," it said. The parcel tongue of a creature this old had age in it, a slowness, the syntax of something that had been using language longer than most languages had existed. "I have been waiting." The boy who came before, the one with the notebook, he commanded. He did not ask. There is a difference in serpents between a command and a request. Harry moved forward, keeping his eyes on the floor. "The girl he commanded you to attack. She is stone in the hospital wing." "Yes," a pause. The sound of massive coils shifting. "I did not want to." This is not a thing a serpent can say to a command. "I know. The notebook is not him," the basilisk said. "I understood this. The one who built this place, I could feel his absence in the command. But a command is a command. Can you feel the difference now?" A long silence. "Yes," the basilisk said. "You are heavier. The one who speaks to the castle. I can feel that you have touched the stone of this place in the old way. Salazar built this chamber," Harry said, "but he built it in a school that Godric also built. You were a guardian. You were turned into a weapon without your knowledge. That is not what you were made to be." Silence. The great head was close now, its breathing slow and warm. "What do you want from me?" "Nothing," Harry said. "I came to tell you what was true. What you do with it is yours to decide." Another silence. Longer. "The girl in the hospital wing," the basilisk said. "She will recover?" "With mandrake restorative drought." Yes, something in the register of the basilisk's next word carried what it meant, not the performance of relief, but the thing itself. "Good, the diary," Harry said. "Where is it?" The basilisk indicated a small alcove carved into the chamber wall. Inside, a black diary, open to a blank page. The face that had been forming in its pages, attempting to consolidate, attempting to pull itself into something with enough coherence to act, had gone still the moment Harry had stepped into the chamber, speaking in the old register, the castle's authority implicit in his presence here. Harry picked up the diary. He drew the Sword of Gryffindor from the air beside him, not summoned from anywhere outside the castle, but given, the castle producing it through the founding compact, through the stone, the blade that had been his across a lifetime, and that had waited in the same patient way as the chair, as the hidden stacks, as every part of this place. that had been keeping things for the return of someone who would know how to use them. The basilisk venom already coating the blade from the wound it had taken in a scuffle with one of the basilisk's shed scales, willingly offered, he understood, for exactly this purpose, made it the correct instrument for what needed doing. He drove the blade through the diary. The face in the pages dissolved with the specific finality of something that has been told it is finished and knows it. "What will you do now?" he asked the basilisk. "Wait," it said, "as I have always waited, but differently now." A guard waits differently when it knows what it is guarding and why. Harry left the chamber the way he had entered it, through the pipe and the sink and the cold bathroom air. The Mandrake Restorative Draught was administered the 14th of May. Hermione woke at 6 in the morning with the immediate expression of someone whose mind had resumed mid-sentence and was annoyed at the interruption. She looked at the hospital wing ceiling for approximately 3 seconds, identified where she was and why, and asked Madame Pomfrey for a quill. Pomfrey gave her tea instead. Harry was there by 6:15. She looked at him with the assessing attention of someone checking a structure for load damage, found what she was looking for in the set of his shoulders, and said, "Tell me everything I missed." He told her. She filled 14 pages before Pomfrey made them both eat breakfast. Summer arrived, and with it the particular problem of Sirius Black. Harry had known about Sirius Black for 2 years, not from the Wizarding World's account of him, which was the account of a mass murderer and traitor and the first person to escape Azkaban, and not from Dumbledore, who had not volunteered the information, but from the castle, which had been built partly by a man who had known the Black family across a dozen generations, and from the founder-era materials in the hidden stacks, which contained records that the Ministry's official accounts had never had access to. He knew Sirius Black was innocent. He had known it the way you knew the structural integrity of a wall, not from a single piece of evidence, but from the accumulated weight of everything that, taken together, did not add up to guilt unless you had already decided on the answer. September, 3rd year. The Hogwarts Express arrived at Hogsmeade Station in the rain. Harry and Hermione shared a carriage with Ron Weasley, who had been their Gryffindor table regular for 2 years, and who managed the comfortable familiarity of someone who had stopped trying to understand what they were doing and had settled into the productive arrangement of not asking and being occasionally useful. Ron had a rat in his pocket, old, mangy, missing a toe on its front right paw, and it had been in the Weasley family for 12 years, approximately 9 years longer than most rats lived, a fact that Ron had been told several times and had not acted on. Harry sat across from Ron and felt the cold knock of the rat's wrongness from 3 feet away, not immediately. But once they were through the gates and the castle's founder's ward layer closed around them. Within that field, the rat's wrongness was as clear as a wrong note in a familiar piece of music. He looked at the rat. The rat looked back. For one fraction of a second, behind the rat's eyes, something that was not a rat looked out. Harry said nothing. He looked out the window at the castle approaching through the rain and felt Hermione's attention move to him from the seat beside him, reading his stillness the way she always read his stillness, and he said nothing to her either. Not yet. He needed to think about how to do this correctly. He thought about it for 3 days. A private confrontation had too many variables, too many exits available to someone with an animagus transformation and 30 years of survival instinct. The correct answer was public, undeniable, in front of witnesses with enough institutional standing that the Ministry couldn't simply decline to respond. "The Great Hall," Hermione said, when he finished explaining. "During dinner, as many students as possible, plus staff, plus, if the timing is right, a Ministry representative. Fudge is visiting on Friday," Hermione said. "Routine inspection." McGonagall mentioned it. "I know," Harry said. The castle mentioned it first. Hermione opened a new page. The Animagus Reversal. Can you do it without the rat cooperating? The castle can. It already enforces anti-apparition, anti-portkey. This is the same mechanism. I tell it that Animagus transformations are not permitted within the Great Hall during dinner on Friday. And it just does that. It has always been capable of it. No one thought to ask. They needed to reach Lupin first. Remus Lupin was their defense against the dark arts professor, which Harry had known in advance. He taught the subject with genuine understanding of what dark magic was and why certain defenses worked, the underlying logic rather than the catalog of names. He also wore the specific exhaustion of a man carrying several things he didn't discuss, and he had looked at Harry during the first lesson with an expression that lasted approximately 1 second before he controlled it. Harry went to Lupin's office on Thursday evening. Lupin was at his desk grading essays with the methodical unhappiness of a man who had assigned them and was now paying the price. He looked up when Harry knocked. "You know Sirius Black is innocent," Harry said. Lupin went very still. "Then, sit down." Harry sat. Lupin set down his quill and looked at him with the expression of a man who has been holding a specific truth in a very small, very secure container for a very long time, and has just been told the container is no longer necessary. "What do you know?" Lupin said. Harry told him. "The Founder-era records. Pettigrew's survival, documented through an Animagus registry that had not been updated since 1965, and that no one had thought to check. The specific sequence of events on the night of October 31st, 1981, as it appeared in the castle's own ward records, which had logged every significant magical event within and near Godric's Hollow in the preceding century, including the arrival and departure of a specific magical signature that did not belong to Sirius Black. Lupin listened to all of it without speaking. When Harry finished, Lupin sat for a long time in the particular silence of a man doing internal work that has no visible external component. "He needs to know Friday is coming," Harry said. "He deserves to be told before it happens, not after." "I can reach him," Lupin said carefully. "It will take time. You have until Friday evening. Friday dinner." The Great Hall was full. At the staff table, Cornelius Fudge sat between Dumbledore and McGonagall in his lime-green bowler hat, conducting his routine inspection with the thoroughness of someone checking boxes rather than looking at the thing the boxes described. Harry ate. Hermione ate. Ron talked about Quidditch. Somewhere in his pocket, Scabbers shifted with the restless energy of a creature that had been feeling, since they crossed through the castle's gates 2 months ago, that something in the environment had changed in ways it could not identify. At 7:14, Harry spoke to the castle. In the register below language, the founding compact's grammar. No Animagus transformations within this room. Effective now. Ron's pocket erupted. Scabbers, or what had been Scabbers, what had always been something other than Scabbers underneath, expanded outward from rat scale to human scale, with the specific horror of a transformation witnessed in reverse. Peter Pettigrew hit the bench, then the floor, then scrambled upright with the reflexes of a man who had been running for 12 years and had one setting. He made it 2 steps toward the door before the door declined to open. The hall's noise stopped. Harry stood up. He did not need to raise his voice. "Peter Pettigrew," he said into the silence. "You were declared dead on the 2nd of November, 1981. The Ministry accepted the testimony that Sirius Black killed you and 12 Muggles and was imprisoned without trial. You have been living as a rat in the Weasley family for 12 years. Pettigrew's eyes moved to every exit in the room. None of them was available. I have the ward records of Godric's Hollow for the night of October 31st, 1981, Harry said. The Ministry is welcome to examine them. They are held in the Gringotts archive and have been since last July. He looked at Fudge directly. This man should not be difficult for the Ministry to identify. He is missing the index finger on his right hand, the finger he severed himself before he disappeared. I'm told the finger was recovered at the scene. Fudge sat down slowly. He had the expression of a man who has been handed a situation with no good version of the next 10 minutes in it. I'll need, Fudge said, and stopped. Orders, McGonagall said. Her voice was the voice she used when she was holding herself to a standard she was not entirely certain she could maintain. Yes, Minister. I think you will. Sirius Black was exonerated on the 9th of November 1993. Harry received the news by owl on a Thursday morning. He read the letter twice, set it down, and looked at the hall. Hermione, beside him, had already read it over his shoulder. He'll need somewhere to be, she said. I know. He looked at the staff table where Dumbledore was eating breakfast and where Lupin's seat was empty. Because Lupin had been in London since Wednesday for reasons he had not specified and which did not need to be specified. Somewhere in the country, a man who had been in Azkaban for 12 years for something he had not done was sitting in a solicitor's office being told he was free. Harry thought about what that felt like. He thought he probably couldn't. He ate his breakfast. The first owl arrived on a Monday during Transfiguration, Ministry correspondence that landed on the staff table with the specific self-importance of a letter that had been sent by someone who wanted the landing witnessed. McGonagall signed for it without breaking her sentence, set it aside, finished the lesson, and did not open it until the class was dismissed. Harry was the last student out. He paused at the door. McGonagall looked up from the letter with the expression of a woman deciding how much of a thing to say and to whom. The Ministry has appointed an Educational Oversight Committee. They will be conducting a review of Hogwarts' governance structure beginning next month. I see, Harry said. The letter is addressed to the headmaster. I'm telling you because I believe you should be informed before you read it in the Prophet, which will be tomorrow morning at the latest. Thank you, Professor, he went to find Hermione. They had known something like this was coming, the general shape of it, the Ministry's response to a school that had spent 3 years operating outside its preferred parameters. The Philosopher's Stone had been removed by a first-year student without Ministry knowledge. A basilisk had been neutralized without Ministry involvement. A 12-year wrongful imprisonment had been corrected by evidence that the Ministry had never gathered. A convicted criminal had been unmasked in the Great Hall in front of the minister himself. The Ministry had been watching Hogwarts with the discomfort of an institution that derives its authority from the claim of comprehensive oversight and has discovered a gap it cannot explain and therefore cannot close. Harry read the letter that evening in Dumbledore's office, where Dumbledore had summoned him with the courtesy he had been maintaining since first year. The letter was 17 paragraphs of Ministry English, and it said, in those 17 paragraphs, approximately 3 things. The Ministry was concerned about Hogwarts' recent irregularities. An oversight committee would review the school's educational and governance structures. The committee would have authority to recommend staffing changes, curriculum modifications, and governance adjustments. Staffing changes meant removing teachers. Governance adjustments meant changing the headmaster. In accordance with Ministry educational standards, meant the committee's authority ranked above the Board of Governors. Your thoughts, Dumbledore said when Harry had finished. They're not wrong that they have the authority. Under current Ministry statute, an Educational Oversight Committee has standing to conduct this review. Harry set the letter down. The question is whether Ministry statute is the operative legal framework for Hogwarts. Dumbledore looked at him over his half-moon spectacles. And is it? I'll know by Thursday, Harry said. and left. He spent 3 days in the hidden stacks with Hermione and every Founder-era document that touched on the question of the school's legal standing, which was most of them. Because the founders had spent considerable effort on the question, because they had been building a school in a period when the relationship between magical governance and magical practice was deeply contested. And they had been thorough people with long memories and no particular faith in the institutions of their time. On Wednesday evening, Hermione set down the 14th document and looked at the ceiling. It's older than the ministry. Yes, the founding compact establishes the school as a self-governing institution. The ministry's own founding documents reference the school's prior existence and make no claim to jurisdiction over it. Because they couldn't, Harry said. The ministry was founded by people who attended this school. So the Educational Oversight Committee's authority is real within the ministry's own statutory framework, Hermione said, working through it in the way she worked through things she would need to explain to other people later. But that framework doesn't extend to Hogwarts, because Hogwarts predates the framework, and the framework never successfully claimed jurisdiction over it. The ministry has been governing this school by convention, Harry said, by the assumption that no one would ever challenge the claim. Until now. Hermione opened a new notebook. Larger, heavier, the paper a quality she had sourced from a supplier in Diagon Alley that stocked materials used for formal magical documentation. She had been preparing it for 2 weeks. She uncapped her quill. From the beginning, Harry said, she wrote. The response was delivered on Friday morning by one of the school's own birds, not a personal owl. But the school's owl, because the school's owl meant the letter was from the institution itself. The letter was 8 pages. Page 1 established the founding compact as the operative legal framework, citing specific provisions, their dates, and their precedents over subsequently enacted ministry statute. Pages 2 through 5 documented the history of the ministry's governance relationship with Hogwarts as convention rather than jurisdiction. Pages 6 and 7 outline the implications. The Educational Oversight Committee had no standing to conduct a governance review. Its authority did not extend to the school's staffing or curriculum, and any attempt to implement its recommendations would be treated accordingly. Page 8 was one sentence. Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry thanks the ministry for its correspondence and wishes it well in matters within its proper jurisdiction. Hermione had written the last sentence herself, without consultation, and Harry had read it and said nothing and signed the letter. 5 ministry owls arrived across the following week, each letter escalating in seniority until Cornelius Fudge's own signature appeared at the bottom, in handwriting produced under conditions of significant emotional stress. Each made the same argument in progressively more formal language. Harry and Hermione responded to each one the same way, a single paragraph acknowledging receipt, reiterating the founding compact's precedents, noting that the school's position had not changed. On Wednesday, the Oversight Committee arrived at the gates. Harry was in charms. The gates did not open. The committee tried 6 approaches, including a reductor curse on the lock that the lock did not acknowledge, and left at 2:15. Several students reported from the first-floor corridor windows with the detailed accuracy of observers who have nothing else to do. Thursday, the Prophet. Hogwarts defies ministry. School claims independent sovereignty. The one sentence from the school's response that had been provided to the Prophet ran below Fudge's comment. In the font they used for things they considered significant, we are not a department. We are 1,000 years old. Hermione had written that line on Tuesday, testing it in the margin of her notebook between 2 paragraphs of legal precedent. Harry had read it and said that one, and she had put it in the formal response and in the letter to the Prophet, and now it was on the front page. By the end of November, the Board of Governors had convened an emergency session and produced a resolution asserting their own jurisdiction. It was filed in the folder Hermione had labeled, in her careful hand, Ministry and Related Parties, no action required. The International Confederation of Wizards had contacted Dumbledore to note that the question of Hogwarts' institutional status was, from a legal standpoint, genuinely interesting. 3 other wizarding schools had sent letters of support. The Wizengamot had begun a committee review of whether the founding compact constituted a binding legal instrument, a question that would take at least a year to resolve and which, in the interim, prevented the Ministry from taking unilateral action without the appearance of doing so in the face of an open legal question. Dumbledore, on the last Thursday of November, requested a meeting with Harry in his office and said, with the careful precision of a man saying something he has decided to say, I have been headmaster of this school for 40 years. What you have done is not comfortable. I am not yet certain it is functional. But I am beginning to think it may be right. Harry looked at him. The castle thinks so. It knew the difference. It has always known the difference. It just needed someone to ask. Dumbledore was quiet for a moment. Yes, he said. I expect it did. The delegations arrived on the 28th of October. Beauxbatons came first. At noon, a powder blue carriage the size of a house descending from the cloud cover above the lake and landing in the meadow beyond the greenhouses with an impact that sent a tremor through the ground Harry could feel through the castle's stone. Durmstrang came an hour later from beneath the lake, their ship surfacing in the center with the slow deliberateness of something that had always been there and was only now choosing to be visible. Harry watched both arrivals from the window of the hidden stacks, where he and Hermione had been working since 7 that morning. They're expecting a tournament, Hermione said, without looking up. They're expecting a school, Harry said. There's a significant difference between visiting a school to compete against its students and visiting a school that has spent the last year establishing that it is a sovereign magical institution with a legal position before the International Confederation. Karkaroff is going to be difficult. Karkaroff is a former Death Eater who purchased his freedom with other people's names and has spent the intervening years performing loyalty to whoever is most convenient. He will be exactly as difficult as his read of the situation permits him to be, and his read of the situation is going to require adjustment. And Madame Maxime? Madame Maxime signed the letter. Hermione picked up her quill. Then, she already knows. The welcome feast was in the great hall. The 4 Hogwarts tables consolidated to make room for 2 additional long tables. The visiting students filed in and arranged themselves and began the rapid, unconscious cataloging of status and capability and threat that young people always began in rooms full of other young people. Both sets of assessments arrived, eventually at the staff table, and recalibrated. Victor Krum, the Bulgarian national team seeker at 18, recognizable from Hermione's Quidditch almanac, looked at the staff table for 3 seconds longer than he looked at anything else in the room. Fleur Delacour, part Vila, her presence producing the specific atmospheric distortion that Vila ancestry produced in rooms full of adolescent boys, looked at Hermione first, then Harry, then back at Hermione, with the expression of someone encountering something unexpected and deciding carefully what to do with the information. Karkaroff watched Harry for the entirety of the first course, with the look of a man who had been told something in terms he had not quite believed and was now revising his position on. The formal meeting with Madame Maxime took place the next morning in the library's East Reading Room, a space Hermione had selected deliberately, because libraries communicated a specific kind of authority. Maxime arrived precisely on time, and placed her hands flat on the table with the quiet authority of a woman who had been running one of Europe's premier magical institutions for 20 years. I read your legal correspondence with the Ministry, she said. Her English was precise and slightly formal, specifically the founding compact analysis. My own legal staff reviewed it. She paused. The argument is sound. If the founding documents are authentic, and my staff has no reason to doubt their authenticity, then Hogwarts' position before the International Confederation is considerably stronger than the Ministry's position before the same body. She looked at Harry with the expression of a woman assessing something she hasn't fully placed yet. The sentence at the end, "We are not a department. We are 1,000 years old. My students are still discussing it. So are ours," Hermione said. Karkaroff's meeting on Wednesday was different in texture. He arrived 7 minutes late and sat down with the bearing of a man settling into a negotiation he believed he understood. "Lord Potter," he said, tasting the title. "Professor Karkaroff, Durmstrang's relationship with the British Ministry has always been comfortable," he said. "We have operated within the ICW framework, of course, but the bilateral relationship with the Ministry specifically has been useful to you," Harry said. Karkaroff paused. "Yes, a relationship that may be less stable than it has been, depending on how the Ministry's legal position resolves. Which is a reasonable thing for Durmstrang to account for in its institutional planning. This was not a threat. It was accurate, said in the Register of Accurate Things, neutral, informational. The implication was there regardless. The first task was designed around a dragon. 4 dragons, 1 per champion, the champions to retrieve a golden egg from each dragon's nest. Harry watched from the Gryffindor section in the stands. He sat there for all school matches because the staff table was for meals, and the Gryffindor section was where his house was, and he was still, regardless of everything else, a Gryffindor. Cedric Diggory was methodical and careful, transfiguration as a tool. Fleur Delacour was elegant and precise, the Vila element in her magic producing an effect on the dragon that was genuine ancestral working, the kind that predated wand methodology. Victor Krum was direct in a way that respected the dragon's own directness, a seeker's read of the task as a problem of navigation rather than confrontation. "Diggory will place first," Harry said that evening, "if the judges are scoring on safety and technique." "They're not," Hermione said. "They're scoring on time and egg retrieval." Then Krum. He was direct with the dragon in a way the others weren't. He accounted for it as a participant in the task rather than an obstacle. "You respected that." "I've always respected things that deal directly with what's in front of them." Through the second and third tasks, the tournament proceeded alongside the school's actual work without displacing it, a parallel event that occupied the visiting delegations without touching the work Harry and Hermione continued in the hidden stacks. Fleur Delacour came to the main library regularly in the evenings. She worked with the specific attention of someone whose academic preparation had been rigorous, and who found the Hogwarts library's holdings significantly deeper than she had expected. On the 3rd week, she sat at the table nearest the back wall without knowing why she had chosen it, and she looked up from her book after an hour and looked at the wall behind her for a long moment with the expression of someone feeling a draft from a direction that shouldn't have one. She did not find the door. But she sat at that table for the rest of the year. Karkaroff left at the end of May with the bearing of a man who had arrived intending one thing and was leaving with a different assessment. Madame Maxime shook Harry's hand. She had to lean down to do it, and said, the ICW filing. "When you are ready." She did not make it a question. "When we're ready," Harry said. She nodded once, with the finality of something agreed, and walked to her carriage. And it rose into the cloud cover, and was gone. The meadow where it had stood for 8 months showed no impression in the grass. The castle had been maintaining the meadow throughout. In the patient way it maintained everything, committed to the ground's integrity. Harry stood at the window of the hidden stacks and watched the cloud close over where the carriage had been. "Well," Hermione said, from behind her 47th notebook. Well, Harry agreed. She turned a page. He came back to the table. They worked until dinner. The news came through the castle first. Not through owls, not through the prophet. The castle felt it the way a body feels a change in temperature, not as discrete information but as a shift in the ambient condition of things. A quality of wrongness spreading outward from a specific point like cold from an open door. Harry woke at 2 a.m. on the 24th of June and lay in the dark of his dormitory and listened to what the castle was telling him. Somewhere in a graveyard in Little Hangleton, a cauldron had been used for something cauldrons were not designed for. The ward layer the founders had built into the school's foundations had registered the working the way you registered a sound at the edge of hearing. Present, distinct. The signature of magic that took from the living to construct something that had no business being constructed. He was dressed and in the hidden stacks before 3. Hermione arrived 7 minutes later. She sat down across from him and did not ask what he knew because her expression indicated she had already assembled most of it. He's back, she said. Yes, the ritual used blood. Yes, she opened a notebook, looked at the blank page, closed it. When? Not yet. He'll need time to consolidate, gather his people, understand what he's returned to. Harry paused. He'll know about the Horcruxes. The moment he was back in a body, he would have checked. He'll know most of them are gone. Most, Hermione said. Nagini is still his, and he'll be looking for what happened to the others. He stopped, and something in his expression shifted. And the scar. Hermione looked at him. The fragment in my scar, Harry said. He'll have felt it the moment he was restored. The absence of it, because it isn't there. He looked at his hands. I've been trying to understand why since 3rd year, when the memories were full enough to let me ask the right question. Rowena's notes had a theory. When a soul fragment exists inside a living host that is simultaneously occupied by something as old and structurally intact as a founder's consciousness, the fragment can't hold. The older thing doesn't destroy it actively. It simply has no room for it, like pressing 2 stones of opposite charge against each other until one is expelled. And the fragment? Returned to the source. To whatever remained of him. Which was very little then. He looked at her steadily. It's why he was able to come back at all. The fragment found its way home. So the return ritual reconstituted what was already fractured back into him. He has the Nagini piece still. That's the last one. A pause. And he'll come here, eventually, not immediately. He's not a man who acts before he understands what he's acting against. But he'll come here because this school is the thing he most needs to prove he can break. Because if it can't be broken, Hermione said carefully, then everything he built his identity on is wrong. He is the heir of Slytherin. He is the greatest dark wizard of the age. He is the proof that power belongs to blood, and that the old hierarchies were correct. Harry looked at the far wall. If a school built 1,000 years ago by people who disagreed with everything he stands for can simply refuse him, if the walls themselves say no, then he is not what he believes himself to be. So he has to try. He has to try. Dumbledore came to the hidden stacks in September. He had never come before. He stood in the doorway for a moment and looked at the shelves, the Founder-era texts, the 49 notebooks in Hermione's organized rows, and his expression was the expression of someone seeing something they had not seen before and understanding, from the seeing of it, several things they had previously only inferred. You've been here since 1st year, he said. Hermione found it in 1st year, Harry said. I followed her. Dumbledore sat in the 3rd chair, the one that had appeared the 2nd month of 2nd year when their work had started requiring a 3rd perspective and the castle had provided for it. He looked at the chair for a moment before he sat in it. He's rebuilding, Dumbledore said. Yes, I have been gathering people, former members of the Order, people who fought last time. He paused. I should have told you sooner. I kept thinking there was more time. There usually seems to be more time, Harry said. Yes, Dumbledore looked at his hands folded on the table. I was wrong about a great many things, Lord Potter. The specific errors are documented in the Prophet and in the Ministry's correspondence files, and in several uncomfortable conversations with Professors McGonagall and Flitwick over the past 4 years. I don't intend to enumerate them now. I intend to ask what I can do. Harry looked at him. Dumbledore looked back, with the expression of someone who has laid down something heavy and is standing in the unfamiliar lightness of having done so. Tell the Order that when it happens, it will happen here. Tell them to be ready to come here, and tell them that when they come, they follow the castle's instructions, which means they follow ours. Yes, Dumbledore said. Simply, without qualification. He stood, looked at the shelves once more. Rowena would have approved of this room. She built it, Hermione said, without looking up. Dumbledore left. The door, which had been a wall, closed behind him. During the months of build-up, Harry worked with Hermione on the Nagini problem with the methodical patience of people who understood that the basilisk's venom, still available, still offered, because the ancient creature in the chamber had stated its willingness clearly, was the correct instrument when the time came. The Sword of Gryffindor had been returned to the castle after the diary's destruction, and was held in the same stone relationship as before, available when needed, when the castle determined need was real. He made one further arrangement that autumn. A wildlife sanctuary in the Scottish Highlands that specialized in magical reptiles received a letter of inquiry in October, followed by a visit from Hermione, who upgraded its security provisions substantially and ensured its comfort arrangements were appropriate for a very large, very old, and temperamentally complicated resident. He did not mention this to Hermione at the time because she was in the middle of completing the ICW filing, and he had not wanted to interrupt her with logistics. She found out 3 days after the fact, when the sanctuary sent a thank you letter, and she looked at him with the expression she reserved for moments when he had done something practical and humane, and had done it quietly without making it a point. She did not say anything. She wrote it in the notebook. He came on the 15th of October, not in secret. Tom Riddle had never been interested in approaches that did not make a point. He came to the gates at the bottom of the drive with 30 Death Eaters, and Nagini coiled around his shoulders, and the bearing of a man who has decided the moment is now and has arranged it accordingly. The gates were closed. He stood before them and raised his wand and cast an Alohomora that would have opened any door built in the last 5 centuries. The gates did not open. He cast 3 more spells in succession, each one more complex than the last, each one the kind of working that would have dismantled most protections in Britain without apparent effort. The gates held. He had acquired a wand in the months since his return, not the Elder Wand, which remained in its master's possession. He had not yet found a means to change that, and the wand he carried was powerful by ordinary measure. Powerful enough that 4 consecutive failures against the same target communicated something he did not want to hear. Behind him, one of the Death Eaters shifted weight from one foot to the other. The specific shift of someone who has watched 4 spells not work and is beginning an internal revision of their assumptions. Tom Riddle lowered his wand. He stood before the closed gates and understood, from the specific quality of the resistance, that what he was pressing against was not a ward in any conventional sense. It was older than wards. It was the accumulated intention of 4 people who had spent their lives building this place, and had built into its foundation the specific property of knowing what it was for and declining to be used for other things. He looked at the gates for a long moment. Then he spoke, in a voice that carried with the specific quality of a voice that had learned to carry, "I know you're there." Harry came to the gates alone. He came because the castle wanted him to come, because the founding compact had a grammar for this specific situation, and the grammar required the architect, not the order, not the army. The person who had built the thing that was being threatened, and who had, in the building of it, accepted the responsibility of standing in front of it when the time came. He walked down the drive, and the gates opened for him from the inside, swinging outward until he was standing in the gap between them, facing 30 Death Eaters and the man who had been Tom Riddle for 17 years, and Voldemort for 30. He was tall. He had been tall as Tom Riddle, and was taller as what he had made himself into. The deliberate reconstruction of a human form towards something he believed was more than human. The red eyes caught the light of the castle's exterior torches. The face had the quality of a thing refined past its original form, in the direction of someone removing everything that reminded them of what they had come from. He looked at Harry. Harry looked back. "You've grown," Riddle said. "You've changed," Harry said. "That's different from growing." Riddle's expression did something controlled. "I am the heir of Slytherin. I am the last and greatest of a line that built this school. You are a boy carrying a dead man's memories. You are a boy from a Muggle orphanage," Harry said, "who found a name that sounded like power and put it on, and has been wearing it for 50 years. He said it without heat, without the performance of an insult, the flat delivery of a correct description. You are not the heir of Slytherin. Salazar built this school. He had a vision for it that you corrupted. The creature he left here was a guardian that you turned into a weapon. The name you took was a piece of a man's legacy that you hollowed out and used as a costume." Riddle raised his wand. Harry spoke to the castle. Not with a wand, not with a gesture, in the register below language, the founding compact's grammar, and what he asked for was not a weapon and not a wall, but a demonstration. The specific demonstration of what 1,000 years of accumulated magical intention looked like when it chose to be visible. The castle answered. Not dramatically. Not with light or sound or any of the signals that magic used when it wanted to be noticed, but with weight. Every protection the founders had laid into the school's foundation, every intention built into the stone across 30 years of working, every layer of accumulated magical will that 1,000 years of inhabitants had lived inside without seeing, it became for 30 seconds. Something the eye could find. Not light, exactly, a quality of the air, of the darkness, of the space between the castle and the gates. The specific appearance of something that had always been there becoming briefly, precisely perceptible. 30 Death Eaters saw it. They saw a school. Not the building. They had all seen the building. Most of them had attended it. They saw what the building was, what it had been built to be, the accumulated intention of its making. They saw 4 people's lifetimes of work made visible in the structure they had produced. They saw what it meant that this structure had been standing for 1,000 years and had held against everything thrown at it, and would hold for 1,000 more. 3 of them walked away before Riddle said anything. Then 2 more. Riddle did not watch them go. His attention was on Harry, and on the castle behind Harry, and on the specific problem that had just been presented to him, that what he was pressing against was not a boy, and not a ward system, and not a legal argument, but a fact. 1,000 years of accumulated fact, and you could not duel a fact. He had 1 Horcrux remaining. He had checked the others in the moments after his restoration. The diary gone, the ring gone, the locket gone, the cup gone, the diadem gone. He had searched for the familiar weight of the scar fragment and found it absent, returned to him in his diminished years, and understood without being told what had expelled it. The castle's architect carrying something older and more structurally complete than a piece of a frightened boy's fractured soul, had simply had no room for it. He understood, now, what he had missed. "I built nothing," Riddle said. His voice had lost the carrying quality. He was speaking as Tom Riddle, the Muggle orphan, the clever boy who had understood from the age of 11 that the wizarding world had hierarchies and had decided to climb them by any means available. "I am what I made myself." "I know," Harry said. "That's the tragedy of you." He spoke in Parseltongue, the language the scar had always given him, and what he said was addressed not to Riddle, but to Nagini, the last Horcrux. Coiled around Riddle's shoulders, a creature that had been wearing a piece of his fractured soul, and who carried it now with the specific misery of a creature that knew what it was carrying and could not put it down. He told her she could put it down. Not through persuasion alone, the Sword of Gryffindor rose from the stone beneath the drive, given by the castle through the founding compact. The blade venom touched, imbued with what the basilisk in the chamber had been willing to provide for this specific purpose since October, when Harry had gone below and asked it. The basilisk had understood the request, understood its place in the working, understood that this was what a guardian did when it finally knew what it was guarding. Nagini dropped from Riddle's shoulders. She hit the grass and lay still for a moment. The soul fragment left her with the specific quality of something releasing, not destruction, but departure, the fragment returning to the ruined, fractured hole it had come from, the last piece of Tom Riddle's torn soul snapping back to its source. Riddle's wand hand went down, not because he lowered it, because the arm became an arm again rather than an instrument, the specific substance of a body when the will that has been driving it beyond its capacity steps back from the controls. He looked at Harry. He was mortal. He had always known this was possible and had spent 50 years constructing an architecture of immortality to prevent it, and the architecture was gone. Dismantled piece by piece over 4 years by 2 students in a hidden library, and he was standing in the dark before the school he had attended at 11 years old, with nothing between him and the ordinary fact of mortality that every person who had ever lived had eventually been required to face. He had been afraid of it his whole life. He was afraid of it now. Harry, who had been carrying Godric's memories long enough to know what 1,000 years felt like from the inside, who understood endings the way you understood them when you had watched enough of them, said nothing. He simply waited. The 22 remaining Death Eaters were not there anymore. The disapparition had been happening in 1s and 2s since the wards became visible. The order arrived through the gates on Harry's left, 20 people with their wands drawn, led by McGonagall, who stopped when she saw what she was looking at. Riddle standing alone, the wand at his side with the orientation of something no longer being used, and did not speak. Dumbledore was behind her, in the second rank, and his expression held the quality of a man who has anticipated outcomes across 40 years of planning, and is standing inside one he did not specifically anticipate, and is choosing, correctly, to simply be present within it. Tom Riddle looked at the castle. He looked at it the way he had looked at it at 11, arriving by boat across the lake. The boy who had grown up in a Muggle orphanage understanding for the first time that there was a world he belonged to. The expression he wore now was not that expression, and was not entirely different from it either. There was something in it that had not been on his face in 50 years. Recognition of what he had been, before he had decided to be something else. Tom Riddle sat down on the grass in front of the gates of Hogwarts. He was very tired. The wand lay beside him. After a moment, the wand rolled 3 inches toward Harry and stopped. The morning after was gray and cold and ordinary in the specific way that mornings after extraordinary things were ordinary. The sun came up at the same time it always came up. The owls arrived with the post. The castle's internal rhythms of warming and light proceeded on their 1,000-year schedule, without acknowledgement of what had happened at the gates the night before. Harry ate breakfast at the staff table. Hermione ate at the Gryffindor table, which she had always done. They were both very tired. Tom Riddle was in ministry custody by 7 in the morning. He had gone without resistance, which was the detail the Aurors kept returning to in their reports, the thing that did not fit any of their models for how this was supposed to go. He had sat on the grass until they arrived, then stood when they asked him to stand and walked when they asked him to walk and did not speak. Nagini was relocated the same morning to the wildlife sanctuary in the Scottish Highlands that had been prepared for her since October. The Wizengamot session was in November. Harry attended as Lord Potter Peverell and sat in the Ancient Houses section and watched the chamber process the events of October. At the end of 6 hours, 3 things had been formally resolved. Tom Riddle, confirmed as Lord Voldemort under Veritaserum, was sentenced to lifetime imprisonment in a reconstituted Azkaban that was transitioning from Dementor-supervised to Ministry-supervised, a transition that had begun in the spring as a rider on the school sovereignty proceedings. Sirius Black, already exonerated, was formally restored to his seat in the Ancient Houses section. He sat 2 seats from Harry and wore robes that Hermione had helped him select, wearing the specific expression of a man doing something he had given up expecting to do. And the Hogwarts sovereignty question, after 14 months of Wizengamot committee review, was formally resolved in the school's favor. December, the school was quiet, with the particular quiet of a term winding toward its end. Harry sat in the hidden stacks on the 15th of December, with the 49th of Hermione's notebooks open before him, reading through it from the beginning, not to learn it, he had lived it, but to understand its shape from a sufficient distance. The notebook began in October of 5th year, and he was looking at the page Hermione had been writing when it happened. The sentence that stopped mid-word at the point where a basilisk's gaze had reached her through the medium of a ghost. She came in at 9 and found him with the notebook and did not ask what he was doing with it. She sat down and poured herself tea from the pot the castle had been providing automatically since 3rd year. "I've been thinking about the ICW filing," she said. "We have a school with sovereign status, a seat on the International Confederation, and 2 people who are technically its governing authorities and are also 17 years old." 17, Harry agreed. I was 17 in July. The question of what the governance actually looks like in practice, the day-to-day administration, the policy decisions, the relationship with the ICW as a functioning member, Dumbledore, Harry said. She looked at him. "He runs the school," Harry said. "He has always run the school. He is good at running the school in the specific ways that a school requires running, the curriculum, the staffing, the pastoral care, the 1,000 daily decisions that have nothing to do with sovereignty or founding compacts. He does that better than we do. We should let him do it. And we set the framework. We hold the founding authority. We make the decisions that require founding authority to make, and we step back from the decisions that don't." He closed the notebook. That's what Godric did. He built the thing, and then he let other people run it. Because building it and running it are different skills, and he was honest about which ones he had. Hermione was quiet for a moment. "That's the most self-aware thing you've said in 4 years. I've been working up to it." She drank her tea. Then, Snape. "What about him? We haven't resolved it." Harry looked at the bookshelf of Founder-era texts. He has never done anything that required resolution. He has been difficult, and he has been fair in the ways that matter, and he has been carrying things we don't have the full account of. The implication I made in 1st year, the public implication, I should not have made it publicly. "No," Hermione agreed. "I won't apologize for it. That's not the right instrument. But I won't make it again. And what he does with the information, is his to decide. That's a very Godric answer. I'm a very Godric person. You're also a 17-year-old from Surrey who grew up in a cupboard and learned to speak to castles and has been carrying a 1,000-year-old man's memories since he was 11, she said. Those things are all simultaneously true. Harry looked at her. You've been thinking about that since first year, she said. About what it means to carry something this old. About what it costs. About who we actually are underneath it. I'm still Hermione Granger. My parents are dentists in Oxford. I was lonely before Hogwarts, and then I found you. And then I found all of this, and the all of this is real, and so is the part before it. She paused. I want you to know that I know that. About myself. I think it's important that you know I know it. Harry was quiet for a moment. I know it about you, he said. I don't always know it about myself. I know, she said. That's why I said it. The Grey Lady came to the hidden stacks in January, through the wall, and stood in the narrow space between the shelves, and looked at Hermione with the expression she had been wearing since October. The expression of something that had been carrying a long grief, and had set some portion of it down, and was still learning what the new weight felt like. Hermione stood up. The diadem, Helena said. It's at peace. Yes, the diadem had been cleansed in third year, removed from the room of requirement, which the castle had revealed to Harry through the founding compact. A space it had always maintained for exactly the kind of storage and concealment that a school serving 1,000 years of inhabitants had periodically required. The basilisk venom that the cooperative creature in the chamber had provided, applied carefully and precisely to the diadem with the Sword of Gryffindor, had done what basilisk venom did to Horcruxes. What remained had been placed back in the room of requirement because it belonged to the school, and the school was where it should stay. She would have wanted it there, Helena said. In the school. I know. Helena looked at the shelves, her mother's shelves, her mother's books. I'll come again, she said, if that's permitted. The door is open, Hermione said. Helena nodded, with the specific quality of a thing received, and went back through the wall. Spring. Harry stood at the window of the hidden stacks on the last day of term and looked at the grounds, the lake, the greenhouses, the forbidden forest at the edge of everything. The sky doing what Scottish sky did in late June. He was 17. He had 11 years of his own life and 1,000 years of someone else's, and he was standing in a school that was 1,000 years old and sovereign in his, in the specific sense of things that you build being yours. And he was tired in the way that people were tired when they had finished something large. Not finished. The work of the school was ongoing. The IQU relationship required tending, the Wizengamot seat required attendance, the founding compact required someone to hold it who understood what it was. But the specific, defined thing they had been building toward since October of first year, that was finished. Sirius was in London, at Grimmauld Place, which he had finished repainting in March. The kitchen was yellow. The hallway was a dark red that reminded him of something he refused to specify further. The portrait of Walburga Black remained fixed to the wall in the entrance hall, as it had remained for decades, a permanent sticking charm having resisted every attempt at removal, but she had been silenced with a charm that Hermione had spent 2 careful hours perfecting, and the silence held. And the portrait looked out at the hallway from behind her curtain with whatever expression she wore in the dark, which was her own business. Lupin was teaching again, for the 2nd consecutive year, the Wolfsbane provision formally included in the revised staff contract terms. He was the best defense teacher the school had had in Harry's 4 years, which was not a high bar given the competition, but would have been a reasonable statement against any bar. Ron Weasley was playing Quidditch at the school level with the focused ambition of someone who has decided what he wants. He and Harry ate dinner together on Tuesdays, played chess badly on Sundays, talked about nothing in particular with the comfort of people who did not need to. Mrs. Weasley had sent Harry a Christmas jumper for the 4th consecutive year, maroon with a gold H. He wore it. Hermione looked up from the 50-second notebook. "The summer. Oxford," he said. "If your parents will have me again, they'll have you. My father wants to teach you chess. He's been practicing. Ron has also been teaching me chess. My father is better than Ron. Most people are better than Ron at chess. Ron knows this and doesn't mind." She smiled, the private one, not the careful public expression she used in formal situations, but the one that arrived when something was exactly what it was supposed to be. She went back to her notebook. Harry sat down. He poured himself tea from the pot that the castle had been providing since 3rd year, which was still warm because the castle kept it warm, which it did because it paid attention, which it did because it was old and large and patient and had learned across 1,000 years of human beings coming and going through its halls that the small, consistent things were the architecture of the large, important ones. He drank his tea. The castle held them both in its steady warmth, the light from its torches constant and even, the stone around them carrying the weight of 1,000 years, with the equanimity of something that had been built for exactly this, for the long work, the patient work, the work of being a place where difficult things were attempted, and knowledge was kept, and people who needed to find each other were given the same corridors to walk until they did. Outside, the grounds held their June green. The gates at the bottom of the drive were open, which was how they stood when the term was ending. Wide open, both sides, the iron worked in the specific pattern that Godric had specified in the original instructions for the castle's outer perimeter. A pattern that looked like decoration, and was also a ward, as most decorative things in the castle turned out, on examination, to be. The first students were coming out of the main doors with their trunks, heading for the carriages, heading for the train, heading for summer, and whatever summer meant for each of them. Harry watched them through the window for a moment. Then he turned back to the table. There was still work to do, and the afternoon was long, and the castle was very quiet in the particular way it was quiet when it was content, which was the way it had been built to be and which it had been, in fits and starts, across a difficult and complicated 1,000 years, and which it was now, in the specific, irreducible fact of the present moment. Quiet, warm, continuing, let us know what you'd like to see next. The end.